All right, so welcome to the macroeconomics of money. In this section, we're going to talk about money and banking and the role that these institutions play in impacting the overall macroeconomy. After all, money is one half of almost all transactions. And so we want to be able to think about measures of the money supply and how the amount of money in an economy can actually impact the overall well-being of a macroeconomy. What is money? This is an actual question that needs to be answered. A lot of people think, oh, well, obviously money is, these little pieces of paper with pictures of our old dead presidents on it, and it, is what buys you things. Well, we have a lot of misconceptions about what money actually is. One story to see these misconceptions comes from the rock band, the KLF. A few of its members took out £1 million of money, and they had this stunt where they piled it all up and they burnt that money. It was actually really hard to do. It was so much money and it was tightly packed together that it was actually hard to burn all of that money. Now, when most people hear of this story, they think, oh, what a waste of resources. This is clearly just, this selfish, weird, artistic thing where they are wasting resources. That money could have been put to a lot of good. Whereas in reality, what really happened is that everybody who used pounds, they actually all became slightly a little bit wealthier, right? You can think of this with the converse of the story. If all of a sudden the government starts printing off a few extra pounds here and there, the pounds that you currently hold are now worth a little bit less. There's more money chasing the same amount of goods. And so you're a little bit less wealthy. You now need to get, a few more pounds in your hand in order to afford everything because prices are going to rise. Well, the rock stars in KLF, they did just the opposite. They took some of the money out of the economy, which really just made everybody's money that they were holding worth a little bit more. And so we can see that the average response to this story is, oh, we could have bought some resources or things like that, because as an individual, money means purchasing power. But we have to think about, what does this money mean for the overall macro economy? And that is a question that needs answered. So sometimes we have these notions that we understand how something works, but really we don't understand it as well as we thought once we start to kind of dive into what it's actually representing. So there's some interesting work in psychology on this called the illusion of explanatory depth. And they ask you questions like, well, how well do you know how a toilet works? Right? And they say, well, how confident are you in your understanding of how a toilet works? And people are usually, fairly confident, not great, all this kind of stuff or whatever. And then they ask them to explain, how does a toilet flush? Right? Like, how does the water actually drain out and go out from a toilet? Like, what's powering that, phenomena from happening? And when people are asked this and they try and explain it, they start to realize, oh my gosh, I don't really know how a toilet works. I was kind of overconfident in my understanding of what was occurring. How do toilets actually flush? It's from a siphoning effect, right? It's from atmospheric pressure that pushes liquid up and gravity pulling liquid down, and this whole siphoning effect. We don't understand this. We just know that when you flush a toilet, the water goes away, right? And here, there you go. Well, this is kind of a metaphor for our understanding of what is money. We think we understand what money is really, really well, but in all actuality, we need to answer that question a little bit deeper to understand how money actually works out. We know what it is at a surface level, but a deeper understanding can help us understand more of how it impacts our macroeconomy. Perhaps we have an illusion of explanatory depth when it comes to money and banking and other issues that deal with the macroeconomy. So what is money? Well, as Milton Friedman said, money is whatever is generally accepted in exchange for goods and services, accepted not as an object to be consumed, but as an object that represents a temporary abode of purchasing power to be used for buying still other goods and services. The common textbook understanding of what money is something that serves three functions. And the three functions are stated here: a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. A medium of exchange is this idea that an asset is used to buy and sell goods and services. So anything that is readily acceptable as a payment is a medium of exchange. It is serving as this medium. A medium can be defined as a substance regarded as the means of transmission, right? Or the force or effect of things, right? It is the medium, the thing that transmits and allows the exchange to actually take place, right? This is that medium of exchange. It's an agency or a means of doing something. It's a means of allowing that exchange to take place. Store of value means that we are allowing people to transfer their purchasing power from one time period to another. It stores value across time periods. It allows you to provide a service now without having to consume your reward for your services right away. The function of a unit of account is helping us measure the value of something. So it's not storing that value, but it's helping us measure that value. It's the measurement used by people to post prices and keep track of things like revenues and costs. It's the yardstick that people use to understand how much value they have given to others or they are due. So it is this yardstick that we have. It is something that we can measure how much value something was worth. So we have this unit of account. So overall, what do we have? We have a medium of exchange. It allows us to trade. A store of value. It keeps the value across times. And a unit of account. It's this yardstick for saying how much was this worth and how much cost did we actually have. So why is money valuable? Money is valuable for the same reason that other commodities are valuable. It does something for us. In this case, it reduces the transaction cost of exchange. A transaction cost is incurred every time we make an economic exchange, and it would be very, very costly if every time I supplied something to somebody else, they had to have on them something that I also wanted from them. When I give economics lectures, it's very rare that somebody in that class has something that I actually want. And in exchange, instead, what they do is they pay money. So they pay money to the college or university that I'm working at, and then they pay my salary so that I can go off and pick whatever I would like to get. There would be a huge transaction cost if each student had to bring me something that I actually found as valuable as the money that they did. When the supply of money is limited, money is going to have some value. It reduces transaction costs and it must be limited in its nature. So what works as money? If we think clearly about the function of money in an economy, we should start to see that money doesn't have to be pieces of paper or coins with pictures of former leaders on them. What kind of money can we have? Well, if we want to meet these characteristics of a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value, and meet them well, we have to have certain traits or characteristics to our money. We have to avoid things that have a lack of scarcity, that are perishable, or aren't divisible. Right? So we can think of, would seashells work as our money? Well, here, there's a lack of scarcity. We would all spend our time collecting the world's seashells, and the amount of seashells would constantly be changing. And so money, if it was seashells, would not be a good unit of account. Would a fish work? Fish go bad too quickly. They're perishable. It would be too hard to keep money good. A lot of resource would have to go into collecting fish because our money would always be going bad. And so money, if it were fish, would not be a good store of value. But what about if we had money as a Ferrari or some big, fancy car? What if Ferraris were our form of money? Well, Ferraris aren't very divisible. It'd be hard for you to have to pay a quarter of a Ferrari, right? Plus, how are we going to be able to exchange these different parts and these different things? It's not going to just fit in our pocket, things like that. So it's not a good medium of exchange. So what's the point of all of this? Why do we want to think about seashells or Ferraris as money? The point of all this is to show that money doesn't have to be paper issued from your government. It could emerge and be anything that holds certain characteristics of good money. But maybe paper issued from our government does have these characteristics. Sometimes it does, and at other times, it certainly has not. We'll talk more about that when we deal with inflation in this class of macroeconomics, because at times we've had such drastic inflation that money has lost these functions and has become no longer good money for an economy. Historically, it has been true that money is not just necessarily what the government says, here is money, use it within your economy. That's not really what makes money money. Salt was formerly used as it held stable value, so it was a solid unit of account. Right? Other items like this have been used. Carl Menger discusses the origins of money as a spontaneous order, an emerging phenomenon that shifted from straight bartering to materials like salt, or even in some situations, certain shells or cattle. And other materials have been used at the kind of base of the start of this spontaneous order, but then they don't hold the properties quite as well as other things do. And so we've moved on through this process of exchanging to materials like gold and silver, as they serve these functions a little bit better as the society kind of grew. And then eventually this spontaneous ordering, this emerging phenomena, switched to paper representing those pieces of gold or silver, etc. Money is just this emergent phenomena because it serves the functions that we talked about: the medium of exchange, store of value, and unit of account. Money does not necessarily have to be what the government says it is. It is important to see that what gives money its value is that everyone else believes it has value as well. And one way to build that belief is to have the three functions of money functioning well. So what kind of money can we use? Well, we're going to really focus on two different types: commodity monies or fiat money. Commodity monies are monies that are backed by things such as gold or silver, right? There's something that is already having value in the market, right? And so gold is already used within a market for jewelry or other things like this. And then we use that as kind of also our medium of exchange. So that would be a commodity money, right? Another example of this is actually cigarettes. And this idea comes to us in examples, kind of historical examples, where they say cigarettes were used in prisons or jails for a while to kind of make exchanges take place. They were kind of the unit of account, store of value, and medium of exchange. But more famously, an economist who was in a prisoner of war camp examined at that prisoner of war camp an economy that emerged, and what served the function of money was actually cigarettes. This had some value. It was a commodity that some people liked to smoke during this time period, but not all people did. But nonetheless, even if you weren't a smoker, you wanted to collect cigarettes because it started to serve the role as money. So we have this idea of a commodity money. Money is something that already has value in the market. Fiat money is used as money because it simply has common usage. It doesn't have intrinsic value on the market for something else. And so we can think of our modern money as this: coins, check deposits, bills, things like that are fiat money. They don't have a intrinsic value on the market other than the fact that they are the money that we use. So what is money in the United States economy? How much money do we have in the United States economy? This is actually a really hard question to answer, and there's multiple different answers. It depends on the type of measurement that we use. We'll focus on two here: the M1 money supply and then also the M2 money supply. The most fundamental function that money plays is as a medium of exchange. And if we get at the heart of the medium of exchange, that's really what is measured by the M1 money supply. The M1 money supply is basically measuring things that can easily be used in exchange. So obviously currency fits here. But also, if you want to buy something from a store, a lot of them will let you pay with a check or a debit card, things like that. And that's where we get these checking deposits in there as well. Then you can also add to this the idea of traveler's checks. But the idea here that we want to focus on is that the M1 money supply, it's a very narrow measure, and it's trying to focus on kind of the idea of the money as a medium of exchange. We're trying to measure money as it's used easily in an economy for exchanges that actually take place. The M2 measure is a broader measure. So we can see here that it includes savings, time deposits, money market mutual funds, and then also everything that is encapsulated in the M1 money supply. So this segment includes money as a medium of exchange, and then also things that are kind of near money, things that can somewhat quickly be converted into a medium of exchange. Most economists, particularly those who kind of stress the idea of the importance of money as a store of value, that function of money, prefer this broader definition of money, the M2 money supply, to the narrower M1 money supply concept that we discussed previously. So M1 is a little more narrow, M2 is a little bit more broad. M1 focuses more on medium of exchange, M2 kind of medium of exchange, but then also the idea of store of value. So what we can see in this graphic is that the M1 and M2 money supply are drastically different. We can see that in billions of dollars, the M1 money supply is just a fraction of what we would measure as the money supply in terms of M2. M2 is this broader category that uses M1, but then also near monies, and it gives us this broader account of the money supply. Sometimes we use M1, sometimes we use M2, and then there's other measures that are out there, but measuring the money supply is not as easy of a task as we might think. And there's different measures. In particular, we want to think about M1 as the money supply or M2 as a money supply. M1 being narrower, more on the medium of exchange, and M2 being a little bit broader and bringing in this idea of also having that store of value emphasized. All right, so in this video, we talked about what money is, what functions it serves, and how we actually measure it. To continue on in macroeconomics, click the video posted here.